When my mother passed, I thought my sister and I would hold each other through the pain. Instead, she made me sign papers that gave her everything. I lost my home, my trust, and nearly myself. This is the true story of how I went from silence to strength and reclaimed not just what was mine, but who I am. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, this story is for you. Subscribe for more powerful family dramas. Part 1. The morning she left me. The morning my mother passed, the sky didn't look any different. It was still pale and gray like most mornings in early March. But something in the air felt hollow, as if the world had taken a long breath and refused to let it out. I stood by her bedside, holding her hand, which had grown cold hours earlier. The monitor had already gone silent. The nurses had turned off the machines. There was no more beeping, no blinking lights, just the soft creak of the old floorboards and the rustle of the wind through the barely open window. She was gone. My mother. The woman who raised me. The woman who stayed up nights when I had fevers, who whispered lullabies when my childhood heart broke. The woman who taught me to be gentle with others, and far too often too gentle with myself. They say grief hits like a wave, but for me it was silence. A silence so loud it rang in my ears. I remember the way my sister Julia arrived that morning, in a navy wool coat, hair tied perfectly back, lipstick unbothered. She looked like she was walking into a business meeting. Her eyes didn't even glance at Mom's face. She just stood there, nodded at the nurse, and asked where the lawyer would be meeting us later. No tears, no trembling voice. Just that clinical calm I had seen before, the one she wore at board meetings and birthday dinners. I wanted to scream, not because she didn't cry, some people don't, but because she didn't even look. Not one touch on Mom's hand, not one brush of her hair, not one goodbye. I stayed by the bed long after Julia had gone to make her arrangements. I brushed Mom's hair gently with my fingers, smoothing it back behind her ear, the way she used to do for me when I was 5. "I'm still here, Mom," I whispered. "Even if no one else knows how to say goodbye, I do." The funeral was 3 days later, small, quiet, and gray. Just like her passing. People came, said the usual things. She's in a better place. She lived a full life. She would be proud of you girls. I nodded. I smiled. But I didn't believe any of it. How could she be in a better place when I still needed her here? When I still had things to tell her about school, about the dream I had last week, about the flower blooming outside her window? I watched Julia stand next to the casket, her eyes dry, her hands tucked neatly into her coat. She gave a short speech, polite, precise, cold. She was strong, she said, and she wanted us to carry on. Carry on, as if we'd just finished a dinner party and were preparing to wash the dishes. I stood in the corner, clutching a photo of Mom and me from 10 years ago, our faces pressed together, laughing under a blanket in the backyard. That day, she made hot chocolate and told me I was her softest soul. She said the world would try to harden me, that I should resist, that I should always keep my softness, no matter what. I thought losing her would bring Julia and me closer. That maybe, just maybe, with Mom gone, we'd lean on each other the way siblings are supposed to. Grief has a way of breaking down walls, doesn't it? But between us, the wall only got taller. At the end of the service, Julia handed me a folder. "Let's talk this week," she said. "We need to handle things responsibly." She looked me in the eye, the first time she'd really looked at me all week, and in that gaze I saw nothing. No warmth, no grief, no pain, just calculation. I held the folder in my hand, unsure what to say. It felt cold, heavy, like something sacred was being signed away before I even understood it. That night, I sat in Mom's old rocking chair. It creaked just like it always did. The cushion still smelled like her lavender lotion. I ran my hand along the armrest, remembering how she used to sit there, reading the same book over and over, never tiring of the story. She loved stories with endings that felt earned, not forced. Life's endings aren't tidy, she used to say, but they should always feel honest. I wasn't ready for an ending, especially not this one. There are moments in life that change you, but not with fireworks or thunder. Sometimes they arrive in silence, in folders, in glances that don't meet your eyes. That was the morning I lost my mother, and though I didn't know it yet, it was also the morning I started losing everything else. Part 2, the paper I shouldn't have signed. 3 days after the funeral, Julia texted me, "Come by the house. We need to finalize things. No hello, no how are you, just business." It was still hard for me to call it the house. It was Mom's house, our house. The place with the uneven porch steps, the scratched wooden floors, the wind chime that played a different tune depending on the season. Now, even the wind felt unfamiliar. Julia was already sitting at the dining table when I arrived. She had papers spread out in front of her like a banker prepping for a client. Her tone was clipped, efficient. "This is just a simple transfer of responsibilities," she said. "Since you're not really working full-time and don't have financial commitments, it makes sense for me to be the primary executor." I hesitated, not because I understood what she meant, but because something about her voice didn't feel like family. She slid the folder across the table toward me. "It's better if one person handles everything. We don't want unnecessary confusion or conflict down the line, right?" There was that word, conflict. Julia always said she hated it, but in truth, she thrived in it, as long as she could control it. I looked at the papers. They were dense, legal, full of phrases I didn't understand. I could have asked questions. I could have said, "Can I take these to someone to review?" But I didn't. Instead, I thought of Mom, how she used to say, "Your sister is strong, but she means well," how she would always push us to stay together, to keep peace. So I signed. Julia smiled, not a warm smile, but one of relief, as if she had just closed a deal. "Thank you," she said. "You won't regret this." At the time, I believed her. That night, I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom, the papers still fresh in my mind. I stared at the walls, tracing old posters and photographs with my eyes. The bookshelf still held my favorite novels. The quilt on the bed still smelled faintly of detergent and lavender. Everything looked the same, but something had shifted, subtly, eerily. It was like signing those papers had triggered an invisible clock, counting down to something I couldn't see yet. A week later, it came. An envelope slid under my door. Inside was a formal notice, written in cold, tidy font. Effective immediately, you are no longer authorized to reside at the property located at address. All belongings must be removed within 14 days. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a spam letter, a prank. But then I saw Julia's signature at the bottom, and my own. At the corner of the authorization form, the very same signature I had given her, the one I hadn't really read. I felt my breath leave me, like someone had knocked the wind out of my chest. I reread it 3 times. Same words, same ending. I had signed myself out of my own home. I tried to call her straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Julia, what is this? Why would you do this?" No reply. The next day, I drove to her condo, the one Mom helped her buy 5 years ago. She didn't answer the door, but I knew she was inside. I could see the living room light flickering from the upstairs window. Later that night, I received a single message. "This is for the best. You've been too dependent for too long. Time to grow up." Grow up. That's what she said, as if grief was immaturity, as if living with our mother made me weak, as if I hadn't given up jobs, nights out, even a relationship, all to take care of the woman who raised us. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, suitcase half packed, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. How one signature could erase decades of love, care, and memory. The next morning, I walked around the house one last time. I touched the door frames we used to measure our heights on. ran my hand along the chipped paint in the kitchen where Mom taught me how to bake, sat in the garden where she used to hum old lullabies, soft and steady like the rhythm of home. Then I closed the door behind me. No dramatic goodbye, no slamming. Just one long, quiet exhale. And just like that, I was no longer a daughter with a home. I was just a woman with a signed piece of paper and a suitcase full of memories I didn't ask to carry alone. Part 3. The silence after the storm. I didn't cry when I left the house. Not right away. I didn't scream, throw things, or call anyone in a panic. I didn't even pack properly. Just tossed a few clothes into a suitcase, wrapped up my mother's photograph in an old sweater, and walked out the front door like I was running an errand. But as soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk and the door clicked shut behind me, the silence hit me. Heavy, cold. Not the kind of silence that comforts. The kind that tells you, you're alone now. I checked into a small room above a flower shop 3 blocks from the hospital. The landlady was kind, didn't ask too many questions. I paid her with what little I had in savings, just enough for the first month and a half. The room smelled faintly of roses and paint thinner. Oddly fitting for the way I felt inside. Half beauty, half breakdown. That first night, I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours. The window overlooked a narrow alley where the street lamp flickered like it couldn't make up its mind. I placed the photo of Mom on the nightstand, leaning it gently against the lamp. She was smiling in the picture. That same smile she wore after baking too much bread or finding a book at the thrift store she loved. I looked at her and whispered, "I didn't see it coming, Mom. I didn't think she would do this to me. To us." I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 3 weeks like a broken cassette. The funeral, the folder, the signature, the notice, the silence. In the morning, I got up, washed my face, and put on my scrubs. I went back to work at the hospital like nothing had happened. Patients still needed medication. Doctors still barked orders. Life moved on. As if mine hadn't fallen apart in a manila envelope. And maybe, just maybe, that routine kept me from falling to pieces. Because at least in the hospital, things made sense. Pain was charted. Healing had a protocol. But at night, the silence crept back in. I stopped calling Julia. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped expecting her to apologize or explain. Some betrayals are so clean, so precise. They leave no room for closure. Just a quiet, aching space where family used to be. People around me didn't ask much, and I didn't offer anything. It's funny. You can lose everything and still go unnoticed if you smile just right. But one evening, an older nurse named Carol handed me a cup of tea and said, "You've been walking like you're underwater. Whatever it is, you don't have to drown alone." I almost cried right then, but I didn't. I just nodded. That night, I stayed up Googling what to do if a family member takes your inheritance. I found forums, stories like mine, some worse, some never resolved. But one thread stuck with me. Silence isn't weakness, sometimes it's strategy. That phrase lived in my head for days. I dug out the envelope Julia had me sign. I read it, really read it. For the first time, page by page, line by line, there were things I didn't remember agreeing to, initials I never wrote, dates that didn't match. It wasn't just betrayal, it was manipulation, and possibly fraud. I went to the Legal Aid Center 2 blocks from the hospital. It was a small office with flickering lights and tired chairs. But the woman at the front desk listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She looked through the documents, flipped one page twice, then said quietly, "Some of these signatures look altered. We might be able to fight this." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel strong, but I felt awake. For the first time in weeks, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, but resolve. That night, I whispered to Mom's photo again. She took the house, but she doesn't get to take me. Part 4. Building my case in silence. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't tell friends or post a sad story online. There were no angry rants, no hashtags, no cries for justice. I simply began, quietly, carefully. Every evening after work, I took an hour at the tiny kitchen table in my rented room. I laid out the papers again, this time with a magnifying glass. I circled dates, compared signatures, checked ink thickness under the light. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't even particularly clever. But I was determined, and somehow that was enough. At the legal aid office, a paralegal named Denise took interest in my case. She reminded me a little of Mom. Kind eyes, firm voice, no nonsense. She read everything I brought, twice. "This document's been altered," she said. "There's white out here. Ink overlaps in a way that doesn't match a single sitting. And the power of attorney clause? It shouldn't have been in there at all, especially not without notarization." That night, I sat on the bus home with tears in my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because, for the first time in weeks, someone believed me. Over the next month, I collected more. I dug through Mom's old emails. I found one she'd sent Julia just weeks before she passed. "Make sure Marianne keeps the house. She's taken care of me all these years." I printed it, highlighted it, filed it. I found Mom's handwritten journal in an old cardboard box I hadn't opened. On one page, dated last fall, she wrote, "Julia keeps asking about property stuff. I told her it's all in both our names, but Marianne deserves to stay. It's her home." I took pictures of every page, scanned them, backed them up 3 different ways. Every weekend, I met with Denise. She walked me through legal steps, slowly, kindly, like she knew I was holding myself together with string. "You don't need to yell to be heard," she said one day. "You're doing just fine." Meanwhile, Julia stayed silent. Not a single message. Not even a, "How are you?" Some days I wondered if she thought I'd disappear, that I'd stay quiet forever, that I'd accept what she did because that's what I'd always done before. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. Grief had cracked something open in me, not bitterness. Something better. Clarity. One afternoon I stopped by the cemetery. Mom's grave was simple, just how she wanted. No fancy stone, just her name, a short verse, and a bouquet of lilacs someone had left. I sat by her for a long time. "I'm not trying to take revenge, Mom," I whispered, "but I won't let her erase me. I'm doing this because I love you, and because I finally learned how to love myself." Later that week, Denise filed the case. It wasn't dramatic. No flashing cameras, no TV court shows. Just a soft click of a file being uploaded, just a judge's name on a docket, and the quiet beginning of a long, necessary truth. For the next month, I lived in a routine. Work, legal prep, sleep, repeat. It was lonely. It was exhausting. But for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. People at the hospital began to notice. Carol, the nurse who once gave me tea, smiled one day and said, "You're walking different now. Lighter, like you dropped something heavy." I didn't tell her the whole story, but I nodded and said, "Yeah, I think I finally did." The court date came sooner than I expected. My hands shook when I opened the letter. Hearing scheduled next month. Location, County Courthouse. Purpose, review of contested property transfer. I stared at that letter for a long time, not out of fear, but because I realized something. I wasn't afraid of Julia anymore. I wasn't afraid of what I'd lost, because I had something stronger now. My voice, my story, my truth, and this time, I wasn't signing anything away. Part 5. Facing her in court. The morning of the hearing, the sky was strangely bright, clear, cold, honest. I woke up before sunrise, laid out my clothes, nothing fancy, just a clean blouse, dark jeans, and Mom's old necklace. The one with the chipped heart pendant. She used to say, "It's not perfect, but it's real, just like you." I took the bus downtown. The ride was quiet. Everyone stared at their phones. I stared out the window, watching the city wake up. Slowly, stubbornly, like an old dog rising from sleep. I arrived 40 minutes early. The courthouse steps were stone gray and taller than I remembered. I stood at the bottom for a while, then climbed them one by one. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to feel every step. Inside, Denise was waiting. She handed me a copy of our files, patted my hand gently, and said, "This is your story. Today, we let the truth speak." I nodded, but my hands were cold. I tucked them into my sleeves. Julia arrived 10 minutes before the hearing. Sharp black suit, high heels, her makeup flawless. She didn't look at me, just walked past like I was air. Her lawyer trailed behind, holding a sleek leather briefcase. I didn't know his name, but something in his smirk said, "This will be easy." The judge was a middle-aged woman named Herrera. Tired eyes, but kind. She called the case number. We stood. Julia's lawyer started first. He used words like entitled, responsibility, and burden of care. He spoke as if I had been freeloading off the family name, like I'd been gifted something I didn't deserve. Julia sat calmly, arms crossed, not once looking my way. Then it was Denise's turn. She stood slowly, no rush in her voice, just clarity. She laid out the timeline, showed copies of the original documents and the versions that had been altered. She pointed out the mismatched dates, the suspicious signatures, the missing notarization. Then she pulled out Mom's journal. "This is the decedent's handwritten record," she said. "It clearly expresses her wishes for the property and for her youngest daughter, who lived with her and cared for her until her passing." The courtroom was quiet. No gasps, no drama, just stillness. The kind that comes when truth doesn't need to shout. Denise ended with something that stuck with me. My client isn't asking for revenge. She's asking for fairness, and to no longer be erased from the story of her own life. The judge asked if I had anything to say. I stood slowly. My knees were shaking. Not from fear, but from finally standing up after being quiet for too long. I didn't read from a script. I just spoke. "Your Honor, I loved my mother. I cared for her until her last breath. I never asked for anything. I trusted my sister because I believed family meant protection. I was wrong, but I don't want her punished. I just want my name and my place back." The judge didn't speak right away. She looked through the documents, then turned to Julia and asked, "Do you dispute that the documents were altered after your sister signed them?" Julia hesitated. For the first time that day, she looked unsure. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered. She didn't reply. Finally, she said, "I didn't think she'd fight it." And there it was, the truth, naked, small, ugly, not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, a choice. Judge Herrera took a breath, then ruled. This property transfer was executed improperly under misrepresentation. The documents are not valid. The court restores equal co-ownership between the parties, retroactively. Furthermore, the respondent is fined for document alteration under civil statute. I don't remember the rest. Just the sound of Denise exhaling. Just the way Julia didn't look at me when she left the room. Just the warmth in my chest that said, "You didn't disappear. You were just waiting to be seen again." Outside the courthouse, Denise smiled and said, "That was grace. You didn't have to raise your voice to reclaim your place." I nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank yourself for not staying silent." Part 6. What I chose to do with justice. Winning felt quiet. There was no parade, no hugs, no family gathering to say, "We were wrong." Just a signed order from the court, a copy of my name back on the property, and a moment of silence where my heartbeat slowed, as if my body finally believed, "You are safe now." I stood in front of the old house 2 days later. Same paint, same porch swing. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a place I had once loved and had to learn to love again. I walked through the front door slowly. Everything looked untouched. Julia hadn't moved anything. The photos on the walls were still there. Mom's favorite mug still sat by the sink, chipped and stained from years of coffee and conversation. The bedroom where she passed still smelled faintly of lavender. And for a moment, I didn't feel like crying. I just stood there, quiet, breathing. A neighbor stopped by later that afternoon, Mrs. Garvey from next door. "I heard," she said softly. "I'm glad it's yours again." I nodded. "Thank you. I think I'm still figuring out what to do with it." She smiled and added, "Whatever you do it for peace, not for proof." That night, I walked room to room, not cleaning, not fixing, just touching. I ran my fingers across bookshelves, traced the window frames, sat on the old rocking chair where Mom used to knit. I whispered, "We're okay now, Mom. You don't have to worry about me anymore." In the following weeks, Julia reached out. One message, no apology, just, "I hope you'll consider selling. We could still split the profits." I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to say. Some people lose you slowly, others all at once. But either way, when trust is gone, it's gone. I thought about revenge. I really did. There were moments I imagined telling everyone what she did, shaming her, making her feel the fear and displacement she caused me. But that would have made me small, and after everything I'd been through, I wanted to grow, not shrink. So I did something unexpected. I stayed, not forever, but long enough to repaint the walls, fix the porch swing, plant new flowers. I turned the house from a battlefield into a garden, not for her, not even for Mom, for me. I started journaling again, the way Mom used to. Some mornings, I'd sit on the back steps with a cup of tea and write what I was grateful for, what I forgave, what I was still learning to release. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it gave it shape. And shape, I learned, is the beginning of healing. Eventually, I took a teaching job at the local nursing college, a small role, part-time. I taught younger students about compassion, about grief, about how caregiving isn't weakness. It's one of the strongest forms of love. And they listened, maybe not to every word, but to the ones that mattered. On Mom's birthday, I baked her favorite banana bread. I sat in the garden, sliced it warm, and left a piece by her rose bush. I didn't cry that day. I just smiled and whispered, "We're okay now. I'm okay now." And as the sun began to set, casting soft gold across the walls of the home I had fought for, I realized something. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't need fireworks. It doesn't always fix everything, but sometimes it's the quiet breath at the end of the storm, the one that says, "You are home, and this time, you chose it for yourself." Part 7. The ending I wrote for myself. I didn't stay in the house forever. After a year, I sold it. Not because I was letting go of Mom, but because I was ready to carry her with me instead of keeping her trapped in a place she no longer lived. Some memories. They don't belong to walls. They belong to you. I used part of the money to buy a small cottage near the coast. It wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom, old chimney, garden full of weeds, but it had sunlight in the mornings and the smell of salt in the air, and that was enough. I painted the walls pale blue, hung photos of Mom and me along the hallway, baked her banana bread recipe once a month, not out of tradition, but comfort. I didn't need a big life. I just needed a quiet one. Built on truth, not approval. People ask sometimes if I ever forgave Julia. It's a complicated question. Some days I think I have. Other days I think forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a direction. You keep walking toward peace, even if the person who hurt you never turns back. I never saw her again, not in person anyway. She sent a card the following Christmas. No return address. Just 3 words inside. I'm still sorry. I placed the card in a drawer, didn't throw it away, didn't frame it either. Just let it exist, like a bruise that no longer hurts but never quite fades. One rainy afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen in hand. I had no plans to write a book, but the story was still inside me, so I wrote it down. Not for revenge, not for pity, just to remind myself I didn't disappear, I didn't stay broken, and I didn't lose the house. I left it, by choice, with my name and my heart intact. Somewhere along the way, people started asking me to speak, to share my story at caregiver support groups, at women's circles, at community libraries. I was nervous at first, but then I remembered what Denise once said. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. So I spoke, softly, honestly. I told them what it felt like to be betrayed, to lose everything and have no one to explain it to find yourself in a flower-scented room, starting over with nothing but grief and a photograph. And then I told them what came next. The small victories, the quiet rebuilding, the healing that came, not all at once, but slowly, kindly, like sunlight through curtains. At one event, a woman my mother's age came up to me in tears. I thought I was too old to start over, she said, but you made me believe maybe, just maybe, I'm not. I hugged her gently and replied, it's never too late to choose yourself. And maybe that's the ending I wanted all along. Not a perfect one, not a cinematic one, but a real one, where the pain didn't define me, where justice didn't make me bitter, where I didn't get everything back, but I got myself back. I still visit the old neighborhood sometimes. I walk by the house. Someone else lives there now. There are new curtains in the window, fresh flowers by the porch, children's laughter in the yard, and I smile, not with regret, but with peace, because the house no longer needs me, and I no longer need it. To know who I am. I wrote this story for me, but maybe, just maybe, I wrote it for you too. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the deepest, but this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about finding your voice, even when no one's listening. It's about choosing peace over revenge and rebuilding a life not out of anger, but out of quiet strength. If this story touched something in you, know this: you are not alone. And it's never too late to stand up, to heal, and to write the ending you truly deserve. Thank you for your interest. Wishing you all the best. May God bless you.